Lucy ran her fingers down Jack's naked back, then nuzzled her face into his forearm. Jack smelled like something delicious, making her dizzy and dizzy. No man, no matter how many in Lucy's life, either before or after Jack, could compare to this man. And why had fate played such a nasty trick on them, bringing them together only after they were both... Lucy suffered every time she and Jack separated. Their separations happened regularly and for obvious reasons. Jack had a wife, Lucy had a husband, and they also had the same family. It turned out that Jack's wife was Lucy's sister, who she met when she was already married and had a family of her own. It all started over 4 years ago here. Lucy and Sabrina had a father in common. The man had been married twice and had a daughter, Sabrina, from his first wife, and Lucy, who didn't know she had a half-sister, from his second. They met 3 years ago on one of those days when Lucy was in a bad mood with work problems and another fight with her husband. Lucy, there's an aunt looking for you. Her co-worker Betty, with whom they had worked together for the past 3 years, had once told Lucy. Auntie, what do you mean? Lucy didn't understand what her colleague was saying, but she herself was scrutinizing the documents she had been given to finalize. A philologist by training, Lucy now worked at the publishing house as a proofreader and was constantly correcting the texts that were handed to her from different departments. Some Sabrina. Third most popular in our country. Doesn't ring a bell. Look what they wrote about the news store. It's like an advertising brochure. Don't get off the subject. Betty grinned. Are you going to call that woman? Why should I? Mukaiju was not happy with what was happening. I don't know any Sabrina. Maybe she's her husband's mistress. Yeah, I'll believe that your Yashka is cheating on you. He doesn't even look at other women, much less risk your family values for another. Don't push it on Harry. Lucy grinned. Harry really was too nice. Whether he wanted to seem that way or whether he really was the perfect husband, Lucy hadn't quite figured out yet. They had been married for over 3 years, raising their 2-year-old son Evan, and Lucy was still questioning whether her decision to become Harry's wife was the right one. After twirling the piece of paper with the stranger's phone number and name in her hand, Lucy tossed it aside, deciding that she would call her later, or not call her depending on the mood. Absorbed in her work issues, Lucy was startled by the sharply ringing work phone. Lucy. The other voice was an unfamiliar female voice, and something told Lucy that it was the same Sabrina who had called looking for her a few hours ago. Suppose so, Lucy answered uncertainly, sensing that this conversation was not going to be a pleasant one. She didn't know what it was that made her think that, but somehow she was sure that Sabrina wouldn't say anything nice to her. My name is Sabrina, and I called you a few hours ago. The thing is, I'm looking for Sam. Oh, Sam? Lucy asked again just in case, although she already knew it was about her father. Oh, Bonder Sam. You're his daughter, aren't you? Lucy tensed, fearing what was to follow. Her father had died a little less than 6 months ago, and there was a danger that there might be other relatives whom Lucy didn't know existed, who might claim the 1-bedroom apartment that her father had left her as his only inheritance. In recent years, Sam had not worked, drank a lot, and made all sorts of unnecessary acquaintances, which eventually ruined him. I'm his daughter. I'm sorry, who are you? Why are you calling me and asking about my father? Because Sam is not only your father, he's also my father. Lucy realized that the thing she feared most had happened. Having taken out a loan for a new car and making the long-awaited renovation of the apartment with the same money borrowed from the bank, Lucy had expected to pay off the bank by selling her father's inherited apartment. Sam had no other heirs except Lucy and her mother. But as it turned out, the girl's fears were not quite in vain. I wonder how you're going to prove it. The mood had been bad since morning, and now Sabrina's call had brought it down to the lowest level. What do I have to prove? Lucy, I'm not going to prove anything to anyone. My father was married to my mother in his youth when he was a student, then left her with a 6-month-old child in his arms for your mother, but in the birth certificate and other documents, he is my father. Don't worry, I'm not claiming his attention or any material benefits. I'm just looking for a father. Why do you need a father? Lucy asked, deciding to change the subject. "Pardon my impertinence and rudeness, but you are not 5 years old enough to need a father's involvement." "I don't need it," Sabrina replied just as sharply. "My mother does. You see, Lucy, there is a so-called first and only love. And this Sam Bondar, whom I have never seen or known in my life, is the love of my mother's life." "I understand that you are over 30, said Lucy. "For some reason, that is, your mother has not seen my father for at least 30 years. All these years she has lived quietly, and now she suddenly remembers love. That's ridiculous." Lucy even snorted at these words, because it seemed so absurd to her that a woman of years could seek out her father out of love and loyalty. "Lucy, listen to me." Sabrina's voice changed. "My mother is dying. She has the 4th stage of the most complicated cancer. She has a wish to see or talk to her first husband, whom, as it turned out, she loved all her conscious life, and I'm ready to fulfill her wish at any cost. I'm not comfortable talking on the phone." Lucy replied, "Especially to discuss family issues, so we can meet later and discuss everything." "Lucy, I don't have much time," Sabrina replied quickly. And Lucy thought that it didn't matter anymore. "I had a hard time finding you on social networks, and now you're making me a quest to find my own father." "I don't have much time right now either," Lucy said, feeling like the last scum, a heartless and unfeeling creature. "I have to work." She quickly said goodbye and hung up the phone, hearing the frantic pounding of her heart. However, her conscience kept her from eating and sleeping for days. When more than 3 days had passed since her conversation with Sabrina, and Lucy herself was ready to pay any money to find out her stepsister's address and phone number and confess everything to her, Sabrina found her. As she approached her driveway and saw an unfamiliar female figure sitting on a bench near the entrance, Lucy realized that this woman was her sister. When Sabrina turned around and faced Lucy's gaze, everything fell into place in an instant. Of course, it was exactly Sabrina. They looked so much alike, despite the 5-year age difference, that only a blind man would have missed the resemblance and realized that these women were related to each other. "Lucy?" Sabrina asked, just in case, though it was obvious without the question. "Yes, it's me." Lucy felt happy to see the one she had been feeling so guilty about. "I think we look too much alike for there to be any doubt." "I took the train 2 hours ago," Sabrina said. "I'm terrified of airplanes, so I had to take the day off. I was afraid I'd miss you or not recognize you, but now I realize that would have been impossible." Together, the women went up to the 6th floor to Lucy's apartment. She didn't know how to admit that her father was dead because she was afraid of her sister's reaction. Somehow it wasn't so much surprising that she had a sister in her life as it was frightening that this sister might be resentful or angry with her. "Daddy's dead." Back in the winter, in January, Lucy said finally, after the sisters had settled into the kitchen, "I didn't want to talk about it over the phone." Sabrina drank her tea and listened to Lucy. She didn't ask any questions about her father's property or other valuables, and Lucy didn't say anything herself. The younger sister decided it would be best if this conversation didn't start at all. Just when Lucy thought Sabrina might want to talk about the inheritance, Harry and Evan came home. "Good evening." Harry was polite as usual and didn't ask too many questions. Even the fact that a woman he didn't know was staying overnight in the house didn't affect his calm demeanor. "Your sister," he whispered to Lucy, and she nodded silently when they were already in bed and the lights were off in the room. "I knew right away that the relative was yours. A copy of you and Uncle Sam. Do you have the same father?" Lucy nodded silently again and then realized that she was unlikely to fall asleep quickly this night. Her worries about the inheritance were unfounded. Sabrina didn't need the apartment or any part of it because all her thoughts revolved around her mother and her illness. Lucy, who suddenly imbued her sister with some warm feelings, offered her help in organizing treatment because Harry's mother lived in Washington and was the head of the oncology department in one of the medical centers of the capital. Her mother-in-law helped Sabrina with additional diagnostics for her mother, but the woman still passed away just 2 months after the sisters first saw each other. Lucy had traveled to the funeral, determined to support her older sister, and it was there that she saw Jack for the first time and her heart thudded in a way that clouded her judgment. Lucy had never met a man like him before, and Harry looked pathetic against Jack's background. Lucy was seated next to Jack at the memorial table, and she persistently pushed away thoughts that seemed sacrilegious. As she sat at the wake, her mind raced with thoughts of how she would have kissed Jack, how she would have pressed herself against him, what she would have let him do to her. The smell of his perfume, the sound of his voice, and even any awkward movement he made Lucy's legs shake, and her eyes darken with unbridled delight and desire. She had no idea at the time that the man was no less attracted to her. As Lucy drove home, she realized she had to see her sister's husband again. She dreamt about Jack several times, and each time she talked to Sabrina on the phone, Lucy had tried to hear his voice in the background. And what was her surprise when on one of the most ordinary days, Lucy saw Jack not far from the office of the publishing house where she worked. That same evening, they ended up in a hotel room on light-colored sheets and stuck there for a long time. They didn't want to part, and they didn't want to think about betrayal. "Why did you come?" Lucy asked a few hours later. "Why do you think?" He grinned. "I saw you and felt something that I had never felt before. Not only that I had never felt before, but that I had never suspected was possible." Lucy felt goosebumps run up her spine. She had felt much the same way. Were they really made for each other? A real miracle, no other way. "I don't know what came over me either," Lucy confessed honestly, and pressed herself even tighter against her lover. "I've never felt this way about anyone." Every time they met in hotel rooms or rented apartments, Lucy and Jack indulged in passion as if there were no families, no marital obligations, no other circumstances or prohibitions in their lives. After a few months of such an excruciatingly sweet relationship, Lucy realized that she had fallen in love too much. Her husband began to annoy her, and there was no desire to come home in the evenings and play the role of a model wife. Meanwhile, the families of Lucy and Sabrina together managed to go on vacation to the sea and also to celebrate the New Year in Washington. All these trips together were a real torment for Lucy. But at the same time, every time she looked at the relationship between her sister and her husband as if under a magnifying glass and convinced herself that Sabrina and Jack had everything bad. Lucy needed that boost that gave her hope that sooner or later Jack would be with her. The lovers' first fight and first separation happened after Sabrina's call that woke Lucy up on New Year's Eve, when the sisters' communication was already 2.5 years old and Lucy and Jack's relationship was just over 2 years old. "Lucy, I've got great news." "Nee," Sabrina shouted excitedly into the phone, and Lucy felt uncomfortable just thinking about what could have made her older sister so happy. What's wrong?" Lucy asked, barely moving her lips and trying to wake up from her nap. She'd been working a part-time job until the middle of the night the day before, and now she had a headache and was drowsy. "I went to the doctor today. I haven't even told Jack yet. I'm expecting a baby." Lucy almost dropped the phone and felt a lump rise in her throat. The last time she'd seen Jack had been just under a month ago, when he'd sworn to her that he hadn't slept with his wife in over a month. Where did this pregnancy come from then? "Are you sure?" Lucy asked a question that even she thought was strange and stupid. "Of course. And the test was positive, and the doctor confirmed it after the examination." Sabrina's voice was tingling with happiness and excitement, overflowing from her head. "I'm so happy. You have no idea how happy I am." Lucy automatically said some warm words, not remembering what she was muttering to her sister. She put the phone down beside her and then burst into loud tears. So much so that her eyes stung with tears and her throat was sore from sobbing. When Harry returned home, he noticed his wife's eyes red and swollen from crying and asked her what was wrong. She also lied about problems at work. The next day, she called Jack. "You say you're not sleeping with her. You told me you and Sabrina haven't had a thing for a long time. You lied to me, didn't you? Stuffed me with a huge amount of bullshit. Thought I was an idiot?" With each question, the tone of voice increased, and Lucy herself did not notice how she turned to shouting. Colleagues who passed by looked in amazement at the hysterical Lucy, who was talking to someone on the phone. "Would you stop yelling?" Jack snapped at her. "Don't you know what husband and wife are? And you're not sleeping with Yasha either. Come on, why don't you say something?" She's pregnant. She told you already. Happy already." Lucy started yelling again, trying to hold herself back, but her efforts were useless. "Oh, don't call me again," Jack said sharply and disconnected. Lucy was taken aback. She called him back, but Jack didn't pick up the phone, and a little later he simply blocked her from calling. Lucy cried, hurt, and berated herself for her intemperance. Soon Sabrina gave birth, and Lucy came to visit her to support and help her sister. With Jack, they did not see more than 6 months, and then happened what was quite natural. While Sabrina was walking with a stroller outside her and Jack's house, and Lucy was pretending to tidy up the house, she and Jack threw themselves into each other's arms again. Passion overwhelmed them both, and only Sabrina's call to bring the stroller upstairs brought them out of their frenzy. As Lucy left her sister, she cried and hugged Jack, who went to see her off. "I can't go on like this." Lucy said this to Jack the next time he came to St. Petersburg, ostensibly for work. They met at their old hotel where their first meeting had once taken place. "I can't live with Yasha anymore. I can't pretend to love him. The mere sight of my husband makes me sick." "Then go," Jack said. And Lucy looked at him hopefully. "But keep in mind that I'm not leaving Sabrina. We have a son growing up, and I can't just leave her with a baby. We have to wait. Wait for the next pregnancy." Lucy raised her voice. "Wait for her to get pregnant again and cut off our communication for years. We've been trying to be parents for over a decade. You see, John's birth was a miracle." "A miracle? It's just a result of you sleeping with her. Jack, I can't do this without you." "Oh, you have for years. You can do it now." Once again, the lovers parted ways for a few months. It was New Year's Eve, and Sabrina came with her son John to visit Lucy. A noisy feast, children's screams and merry laughter. All this terribly annoyed Lucy, who was waiting for Jack's arrival. "Oh, why didn't your husband come?" Lucy asked as if by the way. "He has work, and besides, I'm here for 2 months, and he's not in danger. I'm the one on maternity leave, not him." Sabrina looked so happy, so radiant. It was agonizing for Lucy to watch her sister. Sure, she was playing the role of hospitable hostess, loving wife, and equally loving sister, but it was all coming very hard to her. "Do you think you could forgive your husband for cheating on you?" Sabrina's question was so unexpected that Lucy could hardly stand on her chair. It was an ordinary February evening, and the sisters were sitting in the kitchen having tea, as was their. Lucy was embarrassed and was afraid to raise her head at her sister, so as not to give away her emotion. "What a question," Lucy said at last. "I must think about it." "What is there to think about?" Sabrina grinned. "You either could forgive or you couldn't. What do you?" "I think I could. It depends on a lot of things. Who he cheated with, why, how many times." "I couldn't," Sabrina said confidently, and Lucy felt a prick of conscience. Maybe Sabrina suspected something. Lucy hadn't seen Jack since the fall, and they hadn't even called, so this conversation now seemed strange. Maybe Jack had someone, and Sabrina suspected him of cheating on her. That made her feel sick to her stomach. Lucy fidgeted in bed all night, not knowing what to do. Her sister's words sounded as if Sabrina suspected something, but it was Lucy who was trying to get the truth out of her. Unable to resist. The next day at work, Lucy dialed Jack's number. "Oh, Sabrina was asking me about the affair," she said, as if she knew something. "She doesn't know anything," Jack replied dryly, "or I would have realized it. Did you find an excuse to call me?" Lucy was silent, realizing that that was exactly what had happened. She found a reason to call Jack because she missed him, because she loved him. She wanted to ask him if he missed her, but never dared to ask. After lunch, I had a headache, as if my thoughts and worries had raised my blood pressure. Having asked to go home, Lucy wandered toward the store, then abruptly changed her mind and decided that she would just come and lie down at home. Entering the hallway, she heard her sister's loud voice. "We have to decide something. A few more months will pass, and it will become obvious how much John is like you." Lucy stopped abruptly. listening to Sabrina's conversation and trying to figure out who she was saying all this to. After a second, everything fell into place. So what are you suggesting? Tell both Lucy and Jack that you and I have been sleeping together all this time, that we love each other, that we have a child together. Jack's infertile. I've known that for a long time. He just doesn't want to admit it to himself. He knows John isn't his son, and I can't get up the courage to tell him. And I can't look Lucy in the eye because I'm tired of lying. Lucy came into the room, and then she saw her sisters, and her husband's eyes widen in horror. Lucy smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lucy main key rancher, how sweet. She said, and to come home all of a sudden, and there it was, a sister and husband almost like. Lucy laughed and then cried. Harry rushed toward his wife, but then stopped because Lucy put her hand out in front of. Don't you dare touch me. Don't you dare come near me. You know what I regret the most right now? That you didn't tell me about this sooner. You wasted so many years of my life, caused me so much tears and suffering. Lucy ran out of the apartment, fumbling in her purse for her passport. She caught a cab and gave the address. She was on her way to the airport, trying to catch the next flight to Washington. She wouldn't talk on the phone about it. She needed to see Jack in his eyes right away, because eyes don't lie.